What is sensory overload? Sensory overload happens when our brains get overwhelmed by too much sensory information. Our senses, like sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste, send constant signals to our brains. Usually, our brains filter these signals so we only pay attention to what's important, but sometimes these filters don't work as well. The world can feel too loud, too bright, or too overwhelming all at once. Imagine being in a crowded room with loud music, flashing lights, and strong smells. This is what sensory overload can feel like. Sensory overload can be very uncomfortable. It can make it hard to focus, feel safe, or even think clearly. It's important to understand sensory overload so we can better manage it and help others who experience it. Recognizing the signs of sensory overload. Sensory overload can look different for everyone. Some people might get very agitated and restless, while others might withdraw and become quiet. It's important to recognize the signs in yourself and others. Some common signs of sensory overload include feeling overwhelmed or stressed in busy environments, having trouble concentrating when there's a lot going on around you, being bothered by loud noises or bright lights more than usual, and feeling overwhelmed by strong smells or tastes. If you notice these signs, it's important to take a break from the sensory overload. Find a quiet place to calm down, or remove yourself from the overwhelming environment. Sometimes just a few minutes of quiet time can make a big difference. Who is affected by sensory overload? Sensory overload can affect anyone, but some people are more sensitive to sensory input than others. People with autism, sensory processing disorder, anxiety, and PTSD often experience sensory overload more frequently and intensely. For individuals with autism, the world can be a jumble of overwhelming sensations. They might be hypersensitive to loud noises, bright lights, or certain textures. Children with sensory processing disorder can be either oversensitive or undersensitive to sensory input, making it difficult to regulate their responses to their environment. It's important to remember that everyone experiences the world differently. What might seem like a normal level of sensory input to one person could be overwhelming for another. Being understanding and patient with those who experience sensory overload is crucial. Techniques for managing sensory overload. Learning to manage sensory overload is a process that takes time and patience. There are many different techniques that can help, and what works best will vary from person to person. One effective technique is creating a sensory toolkit filled with items that provide comfort and help regulate sensory input. This toolkit might include noise-cancelling headphones or earplugs to reduce auditory input, sunglasses or a hat to dim bright lights, a weighted blanket or a fidget toy to provide calming tactile stimulation, and a small bottle of lavender essential oil or a favorite scented lotion to create a calming olfactory experience. Experiment with different techniques and find what works best to manage sensory overload. It's okay to take breaks, step away from overwhelming situations, and communicate your needs to others.